Welcome to Everything is Changing. In each episode, we focus on circular economy, ecosystem restoration, energy transformation, sustainable mobility, and water resources. I am Ahmetcan Uzlaşık. Perspective is everything, and everything is changing. In this episode, we are joined by Giulia Conforto, a senior researcher at Eating Energy Research and an expert in sustainable energy transitions. Giulia leads the capacity building program at Escalate, helping cities learn how to build more energy-efficient heating and cooling systems. She explains the challenges of decarbonizing buildings across Europe, including financial barriers, regional differences, and the need for public support. She explains why this is such a vital step toward meeting Europe's climate goals. Giulia Conforto, welcome. It's great to have you here in Everything is Changing.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
To start off, could you give us a quick overview of the Escalate project and what its main mission is?
Of course, the Escalate project aims to speed up Europe's shift to clean renewable energy by helping cities across the EU develop their heating and cooling plans.
We will get back to the project, but I want to ask, as Europe works towards its carbon neutrality goal by 2050, we know buildings play a huge role in energy consumption and emissions. In this context, how important do you think is to make cities more energy efficient, especially when it comes to heating and cooling?
Well, as you said, the building sector accounts for about half of the emissions in the European Union and about almost the same of the energy consumption. And it is a sector that is hard to decarbonize because decarbonizing buildings requires intensive building renovations, planning, technical knowledge. It requires investments. So we see that while other sectors that are overall produce less emissions, they progress faster in the decarbonization, the building sector is still lagging behind. And this is why it is so important to tackle that, because without decarbonizing the building, we are not likely to achieve carbon neutrality. And then again, when you look at buildings, you have the electricity, but decarbonizing electricity is a process that is progressing quite fast. And then you have heating and cooling, and heating and cooling account for the majority of the emissions in buildings. So this is the focus that we have in the project to try to tackle this hardcore part that is the part that is hard to decarbonize.
Well, going back to the project again, I want to learn more about the Escalate. How does Escalate specifically support cities in creating or upgrading their local heating and cooling plans? And what kind of tools or say guidance does the project provide?
So during a number of research projects that we have worked on and coordinated together with the partners of Escalate, we have had repeatedly this experience. A lot of municipalities would like to decarbonize their energy system, but they lack the human, financial, and technical resources to do that. So you have larger municipalities that usually outsource heating and cooling planning, or very large cities like capitals and large metropolis, they have their own energy office. But here in Escalate, we focus on medium, small sized municipalities. And stemming from the idea that they are not going to be likely to have these human, financial, and technical resources, we have identified in the regional energy agencies some multipliers that could help them bridge this gap. So we provide a training platform with a template and some guidelines to develop heating and cooling plans that are in line with the new requirements of the recast. And we train regional energy agencies in 8 countries across Europe. Then they can assist the municipalities in their region, acting as external consultants, because it is in the mission of a lot of these energy agencies.
How do you provide these trainings? Like, do they happen in online or in person, or do you just go and do field work on that particular town or city?
The platform is a self-paced learning environment. We have structured the training program in three main sections. The first deals with the process and the data management in heating and cooling planning, and it's aimed at less technical profiles. So let's say policy officers in municipalities could be the right target. Then we have a more technical part that is the technical analysis in heating and cooling planning, and that spans from the inventory analysis, the potential analysis, developing target scenarios, and then it has some topic specific modules. And then we have one last section on strategies and measures, and that again could be more aimed at less technical profiles. So let's say policy officers. So the platform offers the possibility to take these sections separately. So you don't have to take the whole course. It depends on your kind of profile. And on top of the material on the platform, where you have some texts and videos and exercises, there is a template and a guideline. So in any point in time, any potential user can take the course by themselves. The fact is that as we are developing the course now, we are developing the training material now. We will run an internal round of capacity building this year to get some first feedback. As soon as we have finalized a complete version of all the learning offer, we're going to translate it in 8 European languages. And then in each one of the countries of the specific language, regional partner of the project will host a series of trainings to train the other regional energy agencies in their country. The training remains online, but of course there will be some in-person activities to increase engagement.
While I was researching about Escalate, I noticed that Escalate focuses on towns with more than 45,000 people. Why was this population threshold chosen, and what makes these cities particularly important in this transition?
Well, the threshold was chosen during the negotiations for the EED recast, the Energy Efficiency Directive recast, and now is set. The negotiations were oscillating between 40,000 and 50,000. Now it's set at 45,000. Of course, the number changes over time, but we're talking at something between 1,100 and 1,200 municipalities in Europe. So this threshold makes that you have a few very large municipalities in the municipalities that are affected by the ETV casting requirements, but you have a lot of medium small municipalities, and that has to do with the demographic and geographical structure of Europe has many more medium and small sized municipalities rather than large municipalities. And the reason why we focus on cities is because most buildings are located in cities, in urban environment, of course.
You said you are working on the more the financial part of this project. In your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges? Because every research project like this has some challenges. What are the challenges that Escalate has faced or facing so far? And in general, what cities face when they try to move toward a more energy efficient heating and cooling systems?
Yeah, well, there are quite a few challenges. Something is moving. So, we do see some improvements in the energy sector, and especially in heating and cooling. The fact is that energy retrofitting all the existing building is a lot of work. So we have to be very precise, very surgical in the way we choose what is the right level of energy retrofit between minor and deep energy retrofit on the spectrum, and in which kind of buildings, which buildings are the priority. This is one thing. The other thing is that at the moment, most of of the heating and cooling is provided in Europe with decentralized systems. It might be the case also in your house or in your apartment. You have an individual, probably gas boiler. If you're lucky and it's a recent model, it's a condensed gas boiler, or it could be an older one. The idea is when you're decarbonizing a lot of decentralized point of delivery, what is the best approach? Well, you have multiple options. One solution that has proven delivering a lot of energy efficiency improvements is district heating and cooling. So centralizing the distribution. So you centralize the supply of heating and cooling, and then with the network, you connect multiple buildings. And within each building, if it's a multifamily house or an office tower, then you connect all the users within the building. The fact is that there is some resistance towards building new district heating and cooling networks because, of course, users and consumers are a little bit hesitant and doubtful about how that is going to affect their energy bills. The municipalities know that building a new district heating and cooling network is going to cause some discomfort for the citizens. So, for political reasons, they are also very careful in approving and moving on projects on new networks. It's different when a network exists and users are satisfied, then the level of social acceptance is very different. So that's one part, social acceptance. The other part is has to do with the sense of urgency of the energy transition. So for us, professionals of the energy transition and economics of the clean energy transitions, we know how urgent it is. We know how much more we need to do and how fast we need to act. But if you take the regular layperson, they would have a very different perspective. They would have other priorities. So, and that affects the single citizen, but affects also the municipality. So the sense of urgency and priority is very different. We have seen that a lot of municipalities have been proactive. So they have started developing, for instance, their sustainable energy and action plan or energy and climate action plan when the Covenant of Mayors proposed that. But that again was a plan that they committed to deliver as a document, but it was not compulsory, and municipalities were not due to deliver everything that was written in the plan. So the fact that decarbonizing the heating and cooling sector now is set in a European directive, in the European legislation, changes everything. And again, the requirement is imposed not on the municipalities above 45,000 inhabitants, but on the member states. So the member states are obliged to ensure that the municipalities then equip themselves with these heating and cooling plans. Financing is often seen as a barrier, although from experience is it's a ghost barrier. So it is a barrier only when technical and political resources are lacking. So if a municipality doesn't have a strong political will to decarbonize and is lacking the technical resources, internal or external, to understand how to do that, then financing is seen as a major barrier. But when they want to do it and they know how to do it, then they find the funding, because there are a lot of options for financing. There are public subsidies. There are municipalities that have issued green bonds. There are municipalities that have undertaken the road of crowdfunding. There are all sorts of private and public lending, and every municipality has adopted a different financial approach when they wanted to carry out measures. One other challenge is that, for instance, now with CDD, Recast has imposed this new requirement. But for instance, for SEAPs and SECAPs, when the Covenant of Mayors invited municipalities to draft those documents, they also contextually provided a template and a guideline. And now this has not happened with heating and cooling plans. So at the moment, there is no single template for all the European member states and not a single guideline. We have a lot of best practices, especially in Germany, in Austria. You can easily access online the template and guideline, for instance, from Baden-Württemberg, that is a region in Germany. But this is one of the main aims of the Escalate project, to develop a template and a guideline, so that at least those municipalities that are willing to comply with these requirements, they have an easier life. Let's put it this way.
So there are different layers when we talk about these key challenges starting from individuals going through to the member states. I also assume that some countries are more vulnerable when we talk about this energy transition. It can be due to economic problems, it can be due to some political will or some other related stuff. How do you see this issue? How do you see some countries being more vulnerable to when it comes to energy transition?
Well, it's obvious that in lower income countries, the available income of individuals is on average also lower, but as well as public funds available for local administrations to implement decarbonization measures can be lower compared to higher income countries. The European Union has set up some mechanisms to support lower income countries. So key step ahead would be raising awareness on the availability of these mechanisms. There is the Just Transition mechanism um, that focuses mainly on coal-dependent regions. There is the Modernization Fund, which supports especially the 10 lowest income countries in the EU. There is a special focus on lower income countries also in the cohesion policy funds, so ERDF and the cohesion fund, and then there are a lot of European programs. For instance, the Elena program that gets funds from the EIB and the Commission, and there are some specific studies in the Life Clean Energy Transition program and in the JRC and the EU Energy Poverty Observatory. But in practice, lower income countries would also have different consumption patterns compared to higher income countries. Um, there is no one size fit all. I'd say that because in lower income countries, you also have, on average, lower salaries, so the cost of delivering measures can be lower. Um, there are some financial mechanisms, for instance, that have proven very effective in advancing the deployment of renewables in extremely low income countries. And I'm thinking, for instance, of blended finance with photovoltaic panels that was adopted in a number of sub-Saharan countries in Africa. Um, the blended finance mechanism works this way. So if you're thinking of public lending or public subsidies, usually you think of a grant that is given by the government or a soft loan that is offered by the government. So the government has to take care of setting up the program and covering the whole disbursement. Now, the blended finance is a different kind of instrument. You have a minor part that is given by the government as concessional grant. So it's non-repayable. You don't have to pay that back. And that is provided as long as the applicant fulfills all the requirements, not only for that part, but also for another part that comes from private lenders as a commercial loan. So you have, for instance, imagine 10%, 90%, or a 20/80, where the smallest part comes from the public, it's a grant and it's pro bono. And the largest part comes from a private lender, an investment fund, a bank at commercial rates. So the applicant generally applies through a centralizing agency and has to fulfill the conditions that are set forward by both the private and the public entity. And then they receive some funds that are conditional to being used for a specific measure that has been approved. This increases the awareness among potential beneficiaries, increases the private funds that are coming, the funds that are coming from private institutions, and decreases the burden on the public party, but increases the trust of private investors. So there are a lot of different solutions.
So here I also want to ask the EU policies. So zooming out a bit, maybe very briefly, I just want to know what you think about the EU policies like the renovation wave or the energy performance of buildings directive. Does these policies help or maybe fall short in addressing these challenges?
Well, they are two cornerstones of the European policy, of course. Um, and they are likely to uh, bring about a significant impact in the decarbonization. So the renovation wave aims at doubling the annual rate of energy retrofit in buildings, and that should lead to about 35 million buildings. Now, there has been some misunderstanding in the optimal renovation rate that we should have delivered in order to be able to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Originally, it was thought that an ideal rate would have been 1.5, 2% of the buildings per year. Recent research has first reasoned that 3%, and lately I read a paper that was even suggesting 5%. So anything that helps moving forward in that regard is going to have a very positive effect on our progress in the decarbonization. For what regards the EPBD, so the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and I refer to the recast of 2024, it aims at phasing out worst performing buildings, especially non-residential ones. It imposes that all new buildings should be zero emission buildings starting from 2028 for the public sector and 2030 for every other kind of buildings. It introduces a renovation passport, so a building specific roadmap for staged renovation. Then it promotes digitalization. It promotes the development of national building renovation plans that would substitute the previous long-term renovation strategies. Uh, and it tries to harmonize and improve the reliability of EPCs, the energy performance certificate. The fact is that at the moment, every country has a different standard and a different procedure to deliver its own EPCs. But, as with everything, you have to put things in perspective. Remember when we didn't even have an EPC? No buildings had an EPC. We started introducing the concept. So municipalities, government, citizens, industries started becoming familiar with the idea, starting experimenting with EPCs. Some countries made EPCs compulsory for every property that had to be rented out. And now we're in the phase of trying to harmonize EPCs so that they might one day mean the exact same thing across countries. It's a process, and the PBD is giving a strong push forward in this process.
Finally, what I want to ask, you had a long path with many EU projects, but also with the Escalate. Have there been any surprising lessons that you learned or any inspiring success stories that you want to share?
Yes, I can actually tell you one. Last week, I was attending the Energy Cities annual forum in Besançon, and we had testimonials session in the journey that I participated to. That was the one focusing on 100% renewable cities. And as I was presenting Escalate and the materials that we are developing, the template, the guidelines, the platform, and I was also referencing to the other open access tools that we refer to in the heating and cooling planning process. So CityVat, Cool Life, Safea, there are different tools with different topics. One is on heat mapping and planning. Another one is focused on sustainable cooling. Another one on geothermal district heating and cooling. We had an international cafe kind of session, and I had a lot of participants coming to my group asking if they could access the template and the training material as soon as possible. They were all representatives of Ukrainian municipalities. Now, what is interesting, and I don't know if you were aware of that, last year in 2024, the Ukrainian government imposed on all municipalities in Ukraine to equip themselves with a heat plan. A lot of municipalities are already supplied by a district heating network, but when it comes to modernize it and decarbonizing it, it's going to be difficult. And what is interesting is that for the first year, they didn't have a template to look at. It's my understanding that there is still not a template available. There has been some guidance developed in collaboration with the Danish government that was published in 2024. And there was also some guidance offered by US aid. But as things are going right now, it is most likely that this guidance will phase out soon. I don't know. I don't want to say things that are not correct. I would expect that they might be discontinued, that this guidance might be discontinued. Let's put it this way. So we are currently in contact with a few Ukrainian municipalities and discussing within the Escalate project if we could let them access the template and the guidelines as soon as they are ready for the second phase of the capacity building, which should happen towards the beginning of 2026. So in just a few months.
Giulia Conforto, thank you very much for being here with us today. This was an amazing conversation, and I hope people will learn more about the Escalate project and the energy transition through your answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
That was Giulia Conforto from Eating Energy Research, giving us a deep dive into the Escalate project and the broader challenges of Europe's energy transition. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow Everything is Changing for more stories and insights on how we are reshaping our world in the face of climate change. Thanks for listening. Do not forget, perspective is everything, and everything is changing.